Have you ever had a belt where the holes rip, stretch, or tear out on you? Even worse, maybe you're like a guy I was talking to last week and he'd had a belt for less than 30 days and that belt actually broke on him. Just 30 days and it broke. The fact is, not all belts are created equal. In this video, I want to talk to you about what goes into a handmade belt, how they're made, what they're made out of, talk about the truth behind genuine leather, and explain to you why some belts can break after 30 days, but others you can wear for literally years and not have the holes distort, stretch, tear out, or rip on you. Let's head over and take a closer look at it. I have a few belts here that we've actually cut off so we can look at the inside and see what they're made of. So the main thing when we're looking at belts, you're looking at the thickness, right? What's making up that belt and creating that thickness? Now, some belts, even though they are all leather, they're made up of these different layers. Now, we're going to talk about 3 different kinds of leather here. We'll talk about full grain, a split, and genuine leather. So full grain is something that has that top grain of that cowhide on there. So this is actually the side of the leather where the hair came off of. So that's a good thing if you see full grain. Full grain is going to have some of the fibers of that leather holding it together still. But this is just a really thin little piece of full grain leather. Then that's filled, or they'll say reinforced, with a split leather. Now what split leather is, this is leather in this particular belt. This is just a department store type of belt here that we have. And that's truly leather, but see how much that stretches in there? That's a split, meaning it's something that has had the top grain taken off of it. So now you don't have all the fibers of that holding that together. It's broken up to where things are looser and that can pull. It's almost like a suede type of a feel to that if you were to feel that leather, but it's on both sides of it. Now this one is lined with genuine leather. Our genuine leather does have leather aspects to it. There is some leather in there, that is true. However, that leather is not any bit of a full grain leather. It's almost particles that can be mixed together, glued, rolled back out to be genuine leather. This is another one that's backed with genuine leather. Genuine leather. So that genuine leather on that liner, again, you can almost see as I pull on that, those particles separating. That shouldn't happen with an actual real full grain leather. So that's where you're going to get that tear and rip out in there. Now this one here, it has a little bit of a top grain leather, again, a thin piece on the top. Now this is the one that kills me. The filler on this, that's cardboard. That is a cardboard composite type of a filler in there. So that is of course going to tear and rip and stretch out. Now as long as you put a little dye and paint on the inside of those holes, you're not going to see that or know what that is until it rips out all the way on you. But that's why those are not holding up. They're going to be ripping out, tearing out. If that belt breaks and it's just held on by a thin little piece, that's why, because all this composite stuff in the back is breaking and you got just that very thin little bit of full grain leather on the top holding that together. So in contrast to that, let's look at a handmade belt here. This one here is lined and stitched, meaning it is 2 layers. But what this is Herman oak leather. And we're going to go back in the shop and look at that and how that is when that starts. But notice this is all one thick piece of full grain leather there. And then on these, we line that with Herman oak leather as well. This is a 3/4 ounce, just a thinner piece of that same high quality leather. And that's it, no fillers at all. Top grain leather, front and back, glued together with a contact cement and stitched down. That's why you can wear a belt like this for years and not have the stretch and rip and tear out that you will on another belt. Now, you might say, well, what about a single layer, just a one piece? Grandpa had a belt that was just one old piece of leather. So that's what we call our skirting leather belts. This skirting leather is a full grain as well. So that's all one piece of leather. That's that full thickness in there. Now, skirting leather versus strap leather, that just gets into the tannage. It's a little bit of a different process. It actually just stays in one of the bins longer, but that's diving in a little deep on things. The main thing to know is that this is not going to rip and tear out. You'll get minor stretch through that. I say minor, like you'll be able to tell that that's been used, but this is one that lasts and holds up for years. Either one of these that you're looking at that full grain leather. This right here is a belt that has the 8-9 ounce, the 3-4 ounce, and has been worn for years with very, very minimal stretch at all to those holes. So looking at what goes into a handmade belt, how does this process go? Well, we start with a full side of leather. That is essentially half of a cow. And from there, we're gonna strip out our belt blanks. Now the leather that we use, this is Herman oak leather. What that means is it is tanned in St. Louis, Missouri at a tannery called Herman Oak Leather. And they've used what's an old world tanning system. So rather than trying to go quick and cheap and dump a bunch of chemicals in it, this actually uses natural tannins in the process and gives you this nice rich color to start with. It takes moisture good. It's super good for tooling. As far as a maker goes, it's the best quality of leather that we can get our hands on. Now, from those hides, we select the best area of that. And we go from the back line of the cow, working our way down on the butt end of that, and that gives us the best quality belt blanks that we're gonna get because we don't have the stretch in there. Cows, when you think about how they grow lengthwise one time, right? Now around that belly, they can expand and contract and expand and contract, so you get more stretch out of your hide this way as opposed to lengthwise, and that's why we cut all of our belts down the length of that back to have minimal stretch out of that belt blank alone. From there, we move over and do any of the tooling. Now the tooling and design work's all done by hand. Now this is the part that people actually see and notice the difference on a belt. They can see one that's tooled or not tooled, or one that's stamped and not stamped, but they don't always understand what goes into that. So when one's hand done, it's actually literally done by hand every step of the way. A lot of times you'll see patterns like this on a department store type of belt, and they're what's called embossed, and so that leather is wet down, just like we're gonna wet this down, but then it's ran through a big roller. A big roller wheel has a repeating pattern that presses that down into the leather. And you'll notice the difference because that pressed in leather isn't near as deep and crisp as when we do this by hand. Now, a pattern like this is called a basket weave pattern. That's actually done with one tool at a time. So when you look at this one little tool and a mallet, that is set in there, and each one stamped down individually. They're lined up, start to create that basket weave pattern in there. So it takes a little bit more time than just running that through the wheel. Now a belt like this one that's all tooled up, again, done by hand. And when we say done by hand, it's not just one flower stamp kerchunk. Those patterns are actually cut in to the point that you see with this one here, and that's cut in with what's called a swivel knife. And when we cut that, those are all, again, cut by hand. Patterns all being cut in, and then once they're cut in, we use a variety of other tools here and start adding the different depth and the shading into those patterns there. So we'll grab a tool and we can start actually beveling that, which pushes leather away. And by pushing that down, and we're picking up that pattern, starting to create that depth that you see in the final look of that pattern there. And then we go in with other tools and start adding different shading and details. So all those details that you see are done by hand with individual tools. And that can ensure that every belt is one of a kind and unique, even if we use the same pattern on a belt. So if we have a belt that we offer for an inventory belt and it uses the same pattern, it's all going to have its own little unique characteristics, making that unique and one of a kind. Then we come back and any of the little accent cuts that you see, the decorative, that's all done again by hand there as well. After we get done with the tooling portion, then we go over to the dye and paint station. At the dye and paint station, we'll use a variety of different applicators and brushes and go through and either paint or dye these different colors to get that pop of color in different areas that you're seeing there. Because again, this just started as that natural color, and then we go through, add the turquoise where we want the turquoise, add the dark borders where we want those. Then we go over to the finish station. At the finish station, we have a variety of products that we'll use. Number one, we'll come in and pre-condition that belt with a neat's foot oil, and that's going to add that longevity over time, so we're not going to get that drying and cracking out of your belt. Then we'll use different sealants and antiques to pop the different details in that carving or stamping that we just did, and then do a final seal coat over that with an acrylic finish to protect that belt against hand oils and water and sweat and UV and all the things that are going to be going at that belt. We're going to seal that off to where that holds that preconditioning in there, so you don't have to have a bunch of upkeep on your belt. It's going to last for a long time with all these products that we do. Once all the finishes have dried, then we bring it over and glue that down to a liner. Now again, that liner is a thinner piece of that same Herman oak leather for high quality finish on this. We'll stitch that down on one of the machines over there and then get ready for our final process of finishing those edges. For our edges, they go through a process where we sand that edge down with a high grit sandpaper, and then we put any dye on that edge. Lastly, that's going to get a slicking compound, and we go and slick that off. What does that do for you? What that does is that helps, for one, get a nice smooth finish on there. It slips in and out of your belt loops really nice. But two, it's going to put that final seal on the edge, that 2 layers of leather that hold that together to where you're not going to get any separation out. Even if you wear plumb through your threads on a belt after wearing it years and years and years, the 2 layers are going to hold together even without the threads in there. That's what that final slick does on that edge. It really just puts that final stamp and ensures the overall quality of your belt. Now you're just down to punching some holes in there, setting snaps on the end so you can change out your buckles, and you've got a lifetime belt ready to go. If you're in the market for a new belt, I hope that you can go out with confidence now, knowing what you're looking for and knowing what it is you're investing in. And if you're another maker, I want to personally invite you to come hang out with us in our community group, the Leather Life Classroom. There's a link in that in the description. And at very least, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out every week when we put out new videos. We'll see you next time.